My daughter-in-law said there was no seat for me at Christmas, but still sent me the full catering bill, with my name on it. I canceled everything, and I sent back $1 with a note. If I don't get a seat, I don't pay the table. By morning, the silence had turned into desperate calls. I'm Margaret, and at 65, I thought I'd seen everything. 3 years since Harold passed, I've been trying to navigate this family on my own, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened 2 weeks before Christmas. I was sitting in my kitchen, the same one where I'd prepared 40 Christmases for this family, when the envelope arrived. Professional letterhead, expensive paper. For a moment, I thought it might be a holiday card from someone special. Instead, it was a bill from Premier Catering Services, $3,200. My name printed clearly at the top as the responsible party. My hands shook as I read the itemized list. Honey glazed ham for 24 people, prime rib with herb crust, lobster bisque, chocolate Yule log cake. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Everything I used to make myself, but apparently now too old-fashioned, according to Jessica, my daughter-in-law. But it was the handwritten note attached that made my blood run cold. Jessica's perfect penmanship, the same writing that signed birthday cards she never actually picked out. Hi, Mom Margaret. Since you've been struggling with hosting lately, Robert and I decided to take over Christmas this year. We've ordered everything from the best caterer in town. Don't worry about attending, though. We're keeping it small and intimate this year. Just family. But we figured you'd still want to contribute since you always insisted on paying for everything. Thanks. XOXO, Jessica. Just family. The words echoed in my head like a slap. I'd raised Robert from the time he could barely walk. I'd held him through every fever, celebrated every achievement, been there for every heartbreak. I'd welcomed Jessica with open arms when she came into our lives 8 years ago, even when she started changing everything about how we did things. Set the bill down and walked to my living room, staring at the family photos that lined the mantel. 40 years of Christmas mornings. Harold and me with baby Robert. Robert's first Christmas tree. The year he broke his arm and we celebrated in the hospital. Every single memory included me. I was never just contributing to these celebrations. I was the heart of them. The phone rang. Jessica's number. Hi, Mom Margaret. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. Did you get the catering information? I know it seems like a lot, but we really wanted to make this Christmas special. Robert's been working so hard lately, and the kids deserve something really nice. I took a slow breath. Jessica, there seems to be some confusion. The bill has my name on it, but you said I'm not invited. A pause. Then a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Oh, that! Well, we just thought it would be easier this way. You know how you get overwhelmed with big groups lately? And honestly, some of the family has mentioned that your cooking has been, well, not quite what it used to be. We didn't want you to stress about it. My cooking. The same recipes that had been passed down through 3 generations. The same apple stuffing that Robert begged me to make every year. The same sugar cookies that my grandchildren used to help me decorate before Jessica decided they were too messy for her pristine kitchen. So let me understand, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You want me to pay for a Christmas dinner that I'm not welcome to attend? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds harsh, Jessica replied. But you've always been so generous with family expenses. And Robert and I are really stretched thin with the new house and the kids' private school tuition. We just assumed you'd want to help. Assumed. As if 40 years of love and sacrifice could be reduced to an assumption. Thought about Harold then. How he used to squeeze my hand under the dinner table when family gatherings got tense. How he'd whisper in my ear that I was the glue that held everyone together. What would he say if he could see this? I need to think about this, Jessica. Of course, take your time, but we do need confirmation by tomorrow since the caterer requires 48 hours notice for any changes. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, feeling smaller than I had since Harold's funeral. But then something inside me shifted. A spark of the woman I used to be before I started apologizing for taking up space in my own family. Looked at that bill again. $3,200 for a party I wasn't invited to. For a Christmas that would happen without me. In my son's house, using traditions I'd started, paid for with my money. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to pay for my own exclusion anymore. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at that catering bill. But my mind wasn't on the money. It was on how I'd gotten to this point. How the woman who used to command respect in this family had become someone whose presence was optional, but whose wallet was essential. It started slowly, like most betrayals do. Jessica came into our lives when Robert was 37, a successful lawyer who'd been married to his career for too long. She was beautiful, charming, and 10 years younger. Harold and I were thrilled that our son had finally found someone. I remember the first Christmas after they got engaged. Jessica had insisted on helping with the dinner preparations, but her help came with suggestions. Wouldn't store-bought rolls be easier than making them from scratch? Wouldn't catered hors d'oeuvres look more professional than my homemade cheese balls? Wouldn't it be simpler to have dessert delivered instead of spending 3 days baking? At the time, I thought she was being considerate, trying to reduce my workload. Harold thought it was sweet that she wanted to modernize our traditions. "She's just trying to fit in, Maggie," he'd say when I expressed my concerns. Give her time, but it wasn't about fitting in. It was about taking over. The second year, Jessica suggested we alternate hosting duties. "Mom Margaret works so hard every year," she told Robert within my earshot. "Maybe we should give her a break." A break from something I loved doing, something that gave my life meaning. But Robert nodded along, always eager to please his new wife. "What do you think, Mom?" he asked me later. "Jessica has some great ideas for mixing things up." I agreed, because I wanted to be the supportive mother-in-law, because I'd been raised to believe that keeping peace in the family was more important than my own feelings, because Harold was getting sicker, and I didn't want to add family drama to his plate. That Christmas at Jessica's house felt sterile. Everything perfectly coordinated, from the professionally decorated tree to the catered buffet laid out on rental china. The grandchildren sat quietly, afraid to touch anything in Jessica's pristine living room. There was no flour on the counters, no chaos of multiple generations cooking together, no warmth. "Isn't this nice?" Jessica had said, surveying her domain with satisfaction. "So much more relaxing when you don't have to stress about cooking." But I loved the stress. I loved the controlled chaos of Christmas morning preparations. I loved teaching my grandchildren to roll pie crust, even if it meant cleaning flour off every surface afterward. I loved the way Harold would sneak tastes of everything while I cooked, making suggestions and stealing kisses when he thought no one was looking. After Harold died, I thought Christmas would return to my house. I needed the familiarity, the connection, to better times. But Jessica had other plans. "I think it would be too hard for you, Mom Margaret," she said with fake concern when I suggested hosting again. "The first Christmas without Dad Harold. Maybe it's better if you don't have all that pressure." She made it sound like she was protecting me. Robert, still deep in his own grief, nodded along. "She's right, Mom. You shouldn't have to worry about entertaining when you're still adjusting." Adjusting. As if my 40-year tradition was just something I needed to get over. That third Christmas was worse than the second. Jessica had evolved beyond my simple country cooking. Everything was fusion this and artisanal that. The children asked where my sugar cookies were, and Jessica explained that she'd ordered healthier alternatives from an organic bakery. "Grandma Margaret's cookies have too much sugar," she told 8-year-old Emma, loud enough for me to hear. "These are made with natural sweeteners." I watched Emma take a polite bite of the cardboard-tasting substitute and ask quietly if we could make real cookies at my house later. That's when I realized Jessica wasn't just taking over Christmas. She was erasing me from it. This year, she'd finally stopped pretending I was welcome at all. I thought about Robert, my son who used to call me his best friend. The boy who'd sit in this very kitchen doing homework while I cooked, asking for extra helpings of everything. When had he stopped seeing me as essential to his happiness? It happened gradually, like watching someone drift away on a current you can't see until they're too far to reach. After Jessica, Robert's calls became less frequent, shorter. He stopped asking my opinion about important decisions. He started prefacing our conversations with "Jessica thinks," instead of "I think." When Harold got sick, Robert was there, but always with Jessica by his side, managing the situation like she managed everything else. She'd interrupt conversations between father and son to suggest Harold needed rest. She'd redirect family discussions to focus on practical matters rather than emotional ones. "Robert's under so much stress," she'd tell people. "I'm just trying to protect him from additional pressure." Additional pressure. That's what I'd become. After The funeral, Jessica had insisted that Robert couldn't handle too much family time while he was grieving. My weekly dinners with my son became monthly, then every other month, then only on holidays. And now, apparently, not even then. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Premier Catering Services. My finger hovered over the call button. 40 years of Christmas mornings. 40 years of being the center of my family's most important tradition. 40 years of love, sacrifice, and dedication. And now I was supposed to pay for the privilege of being erased. I thought about what Harold would say if he were here. He'd be furious, I realized. My gentle husband, who rarely raised his voice, would be absolutely livid at how his son was allowing his wife to treat me. The realization gave me strength. I wasn't being dramatic or oversensitive. I was being systematically excluded from my own family while being expected to finance my replacement. I pressed the call button. Premier Catering Services, this is Monica. Hello, this is Margaret Williams. I need to cancel an order for December 23rd. Oh, let me pull that up for you. Yes, here it is. The Holloway Christmas dinner. Can I ask the reason for the cancellation? I paused, looking around my kitchen one more time. At the photos of family Christmases past. At the cookbook Harold had given me for our first Christmas as newlyweds. At the apron hanging by the stove that said, World's Best Grandma. A gift. From grandchildren who apparently wouldn't be seeing me this Christmas. Change of plans, I said finally. I won't be attending the event I was paying for. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my kitchen and felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Relief. The phone started ringing at 2:47 p.m. Jessica's number flashed on the screen like an angry beacon. I let it go to voicemail. Then, it rang again, and again. By the 4th call, I decided to answer. Margaret. Jessica's voice was sharp, stripped of its usual fake sweetness. What did you do? I settled back in my chair, feeling calmer than I had in months. I canceled the catering order. Since I won't be attending, I saw no reason to pay for it. You can't just cancel without telling us. We have people coming. Robert's boss, my parents, the neighbors we invited. What are we supposed to do now? The panic in her voice was unmistakable. For 8 years, Jessica had orchestrated every family gathering with military precision, but she'd never had to do it without my financial backing. She'd gotten so comfortable with my automatic compliance that she'd never developed a backup plan. I'm sure you'll figure something out, I said. You're very resourceful. This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child just because we thought it would be easier for you to not have to host this year. Jessica, you told me I wasn't invited. Not that I didn't have to host. That I wasn't welcome. There's a difference. Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear her calculating, trying to find the right words to manipulate me back into compliance. Look, maybe I didn't explain it well, she said finally, her tone shifting to the false warmth she used when she wanted something. Of course your family, we just thought, with your age and everything. My age? Well, you know, hosting is stressful, and since Harold died, you've seemed a little overwhelmed sometimes. We were trying to help. I thought about all the family dinners I'd hosted since Harold's death. The birthday parties, the graduation celebrations, the casual Sunday meals that Jessica never bothered to attend, but always had opinions about afterward. Overwhelmed wasn't the word I'd use for how I felt during those gatherings. Alive was more accurate. If you were trying to help, you would have offered to assist me with hosting at my house. Instead, you took over completely and then expected me to pay for my own exclusion. It's not exclusion. God, you're being so dramatic. Fine, you can come. There, are you happy? Can you please call the caterer back? The offer hung in the air between us like a rotten olive branch. Even now, even when caught in her own web, Jessica couldn't bring herself to actually apologize. She was offering me a seat at my own table like it was a generous concession. No, I said simply. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, I won't be calling the caterer back. And no, I won't be attending your dinner. Margaret, you're being completely unreasonable. We're family. You can't just abandon us 2 days before Christmas. The irony was stunning. I was abandoning them. I'm not abandoning anyone, Jessica. I'm simply declining to finance an event I'm not welcome at. Surely you can understand the logic in that. I heard her take a shaky breath. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge of desperation. Look, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but this is about Robert. Your son. You're going to ruin Christmas for him because of some petty misunderstanding? Is Robert there? I'd like to speak with him. He's at work. I'll have him call you later. Then we have nothing more to discuss. I hung up and immediately walked to my junk drawer, pulling out an envelope. Inside was a single-dollar bill, a leftover tip from my last restaurant visit with Harold. I placed it in the envelope along with a note I wrote in my steadiest handwriting. Since I don't get a seat at the table, I don't pay for the table. Consider this my contribution to your intimate family gathering. Love, Mom, Margaret. I addressed it to Jessica and Robert's house and drove straight to the post office. The satisfaction I felt dropping that envelope into the mail slot was the first genuine joy I'd experienced in months. When I got home, my phone showed 6 missed calls from Jessica and 2 from Robert. But instead of listening to the voicemails, I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned off my phone and ran a hot bath. As I soaked in the lavender-scented water, I thought about Christmas mornings from when Robert was small, how he'd wake me up at dawn, bouncing on my bed with excitement. How Harold would pretend to be grumpier than he was about the early hour while secretly filming everything on his old video camera. How we'd spend the entire day in our pajamas, eating too much and laughing until our sides hurt. Those Christmases had been chaotic and imperfect and absolutely magical. Jessica's perfectly coordinated celebrations felt like theater performances by comparison, beautiful to look at but empty of real emotion. I thought about what Harold would want for me now. He'd always said that Christmas was about love, not performance. About gathering people who cared about each other, not impressing people who didn't. He'd want me to find joy again, not just endure another year of being treated like a convenient ATM. When I finally got out of the bath and turned my phone back on, there were 14 voicemails waiting. I deleted them all without listening. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't have to spend Christmas walking on eggshells, trying not to take up too much space in my own family. I didn't have to smile politely while Jessica criticized everything I did or said. I didn't have to watch my grandchildren being trained to see me as the difficult grandmother who didn't fit into their mother's perfect world. I made myself breakfast, real breakfast, with eggs and bacon and toast made from scratch bread, not the protein smoothies Jessica insisted were healthier. I ate slowly, savoring every bite and the silence of my own kitchen. That's when my sister called. Maggie? I just heard the most interesting story from Patricia Henderson. Something about Christmas dinner being canceled. Patricia Henderson, Jessica's neighbor and fellow gossip enthusiast. Of course, word was already spreading. What exactly did you hear, Linda? That you had some kind of breakdown and canceled Christmas dinner out of spite. Patricia said Jessica is beside herself trying to figure out what to feed 24 people tomorrow. I almost laughed. A breakdown. That's how they were going to spin this story. Poor, unstable Margaret having a senior moment and ruining everything for her long-suffering family. I didn't have a breakdown, Linda. I simply decided not to pay for a party I wasn't invited to attend. Silence. Then, what do you mean you weren't invited? So, I told her. Everything. The bill with my name on it and Jessica's note. The years of being slowly pushed aside while expected to keep paying for my own replacement. The way my son had stood by and watched it happen without saying a word. When I finished, Linda was quiet for a long moment. Maggie, she said finally, what are you doing for Christmas? Linda's question hung in the air. What was I doing for Christmas? For the first time in 40 years, I had no idea. I hadn't really thought about it, I admitted. I suppose I'll treat it like any other day. Absolutely not. Linda's voice was firm. You're coming to my house, no arguments. Before I could respond, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Robert's car in my driveway. My stomach clenched. I hadn't spoken to my son since this whole mess started. Linda, I have to go. Robert's here. Call me back, she said. We're not done with this conversation. I opened the door to find my son standing on my porch, looking older than his 45 years. His usually perfect lawyer composure was cracked. Around the edges, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled. Mom, what the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? Not, hello, how are you? Not, I'm sorry this happened. Just anger and accusation. I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he'd inherited Harold's height, but Jessica's cold efficiency went upset. Would you like some coffee? I asked, falling back on decades of maternal instinct. I don't want coffee. I want to know why you're trying to sabotage Christmas. Sabotage, as if protecting my own dignity was an act of war against the family. I'm not sabotaging anything, Robert. I simply chose not to pay for an event I wasn't invited to attend. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my heart ached. Jessica said you misunderstood, that you were always welcome. Is that what she told you? Yes, she said you took some casual comment the wrong way and decided to punish everyone for it. I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up Jessica's note, the one that had come with the catering bill. I handed it to Robert without a word. I watched his face as he read it, watched the color drain from his cheeks as he took in his wife's words, just family, don't worry about attending, the casual cruelty of excluding his mother from Christmas while expecting her to pay for it. This isn't what she told me, he said quietly. What did she tell you? Robert sank into my kitchen chair, suddenly looking like the little boy who used to sit in that same spot doing homework while I cooked dinner. She said you were feeling overwhelmed, that hosting was getting too hard for you, that we were doing you a favor by taking over, and you believed that? He stopped, looking around my kitchen, at the spotless counters, the perfectly organized spice rack, the meal I'd been preparing for myself. Nothing about my home suggested a woman who was overwhelmed or incapable. I wanted to believe it. It was easier than dealing with the truth. Which is that my wife has been pushing you out of our family for years, and I let her do it. The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we could cross. I sat down across from him, studying my son's face. When had he gotten so tired? When had the light gone out of his eyes? Why, Robert? I need to understand why you let this happen. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because it was easier than fighting her. Because every time I stood up for you, she'd make my life hell for weeks. Because she has a way of making me feel like I'm the unreasonable one for wanting to maintain a relationship with my own mother. I felt a chill run down my spine. I'd suspected Jessica was controlling, but I hadn't realized how completely she'd isolated my son from me. She monitors my phone calls with you, he continued. If I talk to you too long or too often, she gets upset. Says I'm choosing you over our family. That I need to prioritize my wife and children over my mother. Oh, Robert. I know how it sounds. I know I should have stood up to her. But Jessica, she has a way of making you question everything. She's never wrong, according to her. And when you disagree with her, you're not just wrong, you're malicious, or stupid, or deliberately trying to hurt her. I thought about all the times Robert had seemed distant on our phone calls, all the canceled dinners, the shortened visits. I'd attributed it to normal adult life pressures, but it had been orchestrated manipulation. The worst part, Robert said, is that I started believing her. I started seeing your traditions as outdated instead of meaningful, your cooking as amateur instead of made with love, your desire to host as controlling instead of generous. My heart broke for him. This wasn't just about me being excluded from Christmas. This was about my son being systematically alienated from his own family, his own history, his own identity. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. Jessica is panicking. She's been calling every caterer in town, but everything's booked for tomorrow. She's talking about ordering pizza or just canceling the whole thing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jessica, who had spent years criticizing my simple cooking, was about to serve pizza to her carefully curated guest list. Her parents are flying. In from Seattle, Robert continued. My boss and his wife are coming. The Hendersons from next door. She's been bragging about this dinner for weeks, and now she has to face the consequences of her actions. She's furious with me too. Says I should have prepared her for how unreasonable you can be. That I should have warned her you might sabotage things out of jealousy. Jealousy. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Jealous of what? Of being replaced by someone who saw my family as a performance opportunity rather than a source of love? What do you think I should do, Robert? He looked at me with Harold's eyes, full of pain and confusion. I think I've lost the right to ask you for anything, Mom. I think I need to figure out how to be a better son before I can expect you to keep being my mother. The words hit me harder than any of Jessica's insults ever had. Not because they were cruel, but because they were honest. My son was finally seeing clearly, and what he saw horrified him. You haven't lost me, Robert, but things can't go back to the way they were. I know. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Maggie, I've been thinking, why don't you invite Robert and the kids to Christmas at my house, without Jessica? It's time that woman learned there are consequences for her behavior. I showed Robert the message. He read it twice, then looked up at me with something that might have been hope. Would you want that? He asked. To have Christmas with me and the kids? I thought about my grandchildren. Emma, who always asked for my sugar cookies. Little Jake, who loved to help me set the table. They were innocent victims in Jessica's war against me. What about Jessica? Jessica made her choice when she sent you that bill and that note. Maybe it's time I made mine. For the first time in 3 years, I saw a glimpse of the son I'd raised. The boy who used to defend playground underdogs and stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. Robert left that evening with a promise to talk to the children about Christmas plans. I spent the night wondering if I was doing the right thing, or if I was just adding fuel to an already explosive situation. By morning, I had my answer. The phone rang at 7 a.m. Linda's number. Maggie, you need to know something. I've been making some calls. I settled into my chair with my coffee, bracing myself. What kind of calls? To the family. Aunt Dorothy, Cousin Beth, even Harold's sister Sarah. I wanted to know if anyone else had noticed what's been happening to you. My stomach tightened. I'd kept Jessica's behavior mostly to myself, not wanting to cause family drama. But apparently, I hadn't hidden it as well as I thought. And? Everyone has stories, Maggie. Everyone. Dorothy said Jessica made a comment at Robert's birthday dinner about how some people don't know when to step back and let the younger generation take over. Beth said Jessica told her that you were getting difficult in your old age and needed to be handled carefully. Each revelation felt like a punch to the gut. Jessica had been conducting a quiet campaign against me for years, poisoning family relationships while I remained oblivious. Sarah was the most upset, Linda continued. She said Jessica actually asked her not to invite you to her Christmas Eve party this year because your presence might make things awkward for Robert. Sarah's party? I'd attended that gathering for 15 years. It never occurred to me that I might not be invited this year. Sarah told Jessica exactly what she could do with that suggestion, by the way. But Maggie, the point is that we've all been watching this happen and doing nothing about it. We let you suffer in silence because we didn't want to get involved in family drama. The weight of systemic abandonment settled on my shoulders. It wasn't just Robert who had failed me. My entire extended family had watched Jessica methodically isolate me and chosen not to interfere. I called an emergency family meeting, Linda said. Christmas Eve, 1 o'clock at Dorothy's house. Everyone's coming. Everyone wants to talk about this. Linda, I don't need you to fight my battles for me. This isn't about fighting your battles. This is about family accountability. Harold would be ashamed of how we've let you be treated, and it's time we made that right. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling overwhelmed by the sudden shift in family dynamics. For 3 years, I'd felt increasingly alone. Now suddenly I had allies emerging from places I never expected. The doorbell rang around 10 a.m. Through the window, I could see Emma and Jake on my porch, their little faces pressed against the glass. Behind them stood Robert, looking like a man who hadn't slept. I opened the door to find my grandchildren bouncing with excitement. Grandma Margaret! Emma threw herself into my arms. Daddy said we might have Christmas with you after all. But we have to make cookies, Jake added seriously. Real cookies, not the weird ones Mommy buys. I looked over their heads at Robert, who managed a tired smile. I told them about Aunt Linda's invitation. They're more excited about spending Christmas with you than they've been about anything in months. Where's Jessica? At her sister's house. We had a fight last night. A big one. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Mommy was really mad. She said bad words. She said Daddy was being mean to her, Jake added. But Daddy wasn't being mean. Daddy was just telling the truth, out of the mouths of babes. I ushered the children inside and put them to work immediately, Emma helping me mix cookie dough while Jake organized my cookie cutters by size. Having them in my kitchen again felt like finding missing pieces of my heart. They've missed this, Robert said quietly, watching his children work. I didn't realize how much until I saw them this morning. Emma asked if she could move in with you. What did you tell her? That we needed to figure some things out first. While the children rolled out cookie dough, Robert told me about his confrontation with Jessica, how he'd shown her the note she'd written, how she'd tried to gaslight him into believing he'd misunderstood her intentions, how she'd ultimately blamed me for turning him against her with my manipulation. She said you've always been jealous of her relationship with me, Robert said, that you've been trying to break us up since day one. Do you believe that? I believed it for a while. Jessica has a way of rewriting history to make herself the victim. But watching Emma and Jake today, seeing how natural they are with you, how much they love being here, I remember what I lost when I let Jessica push you away. The timer for the first batch of cookies went off. Emma carefully removed them from the oven while Jake arranged cooling racks. They worked with the competence of children who'd done this many times before, back when I was still allowed to be their grandmother without supervision. "Daddy, can we stay here tonight?" Emma asked as she started decorating a star-shaped cookie. "I want to wake up in Grandma's house on Christmas morning like in the old days." Robert looked at me questioningly. I nodded before he could ask. "We'll need to get your Christmas presents from home," I said. "I don't care about presents," Jake said, focused intently on adding sprinkles to his cookie. "I just want to be here with you and Daddy." "Me too," Emma agreed. "Christmas is better at Grandma's house." That afternoon, while the children napped in my guest room, the same room Robert had slept in as a boy, my phone rang. Jessica's number. I almost didn't answer. But something told me this conversation needed to happen. Margaret. Her voice was different, shaky, desperate. "We need to talk." "Do we? I know you're angry, but you're tearing my family apart." Robert took the children and left. "He won't tell me where they are. They're safe, Jessica. They're with you, aren't they? This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. You've been waiting for a chance to steal my family." The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. "I didn't steal anything. I simply stopped allowing you to use me as a convenient scapegoat." "I never. I don't know what Robert told you, but I never meant for you to feel excluded. I was trying to help. By sending me a bill for an event you explicitly told me not to attend." Silence. Then, "I made a mistake. I was stressed about the dinner and I said things wrong. But that doesn't give you the right to destroy my marriage." "Your marriage is destroying itself, Jessica. I'm just no longer available to be blamed for its problems. Please." The word came out cracked and small. "I'll apologize. I'll make it right. Just don't take Robert and the children away from me." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered 8 years of systematic cruelty. 8 years of being made to feel like an intruder in my own family. 8 years of watching my son become a stranger under her influence. "I'm not taking anyone away from you, Jessica. But I'm also not going to pretend anymore that your behavior is acceptable. If you want your family back, you need to figure out how to be a better wife and mother. That's not my responsibility." "What does that mean?" "It means Christmas is at Linda's house tomorrow. You're welcome to join us, but only if you can behave like a decent human being. No drama, no manipulation, no making everything about you. And if I don't come, then you don't come. Robert and the children will still have Christmas. They'll just have it without you." The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "This isn't over." "You're right," I said. "It's not. But it's not up to you anymore how it ends." Capítulo 6. O Natal da Libertação. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. I woke up in my own bed for the first time in years without the weight of family expectations pressing down on me. Down the hall, I could hear Emma and Jake whispering excitedly, trying to decide if it was late enough to wake up the adults. "Grandma Margaret!" Emma's voice carried through the house as they finally gave up on being quiet. "Santa came to your house, too." I found them in my living room, staring in wonder at the modest pile of presents I'd managed to gather the evening before. Nothing elaborate, just books, art supplies, and the kind of simple toys that encouraged imagination over consumption. But their faces lit up like I'd given them the world. Robert emerged from the couch where he'd spent the night, his hair standing at odd angles. He looked better than he had in months, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt real for the first time in years. We opened presents slowly, savoring each moment. Emma squealed over her art set. Jake immediately began building with his new blocks. Robert surprised me with a photo album he'd been secretly working on, pictures of all our Christmas mornings together, starting from when he was Emma's age. "I found these in Dad's old office," he said as I flipped through pages of memories. "I thought you should have them." There we were through the decades. Harold and me as young parents, exhausted but happy. Robert growing from a gap-toothed kindergartner to a gangly teenager who pretended he was too cool for family photos, but always found his way into them anyway. The children as babies, then toddlers, before Jessica decided family pictures should Be professional affairs scheduled and staged rather than spontaneous captures of joy. We were happy then, Robert said quietly. Really happy. We can be happy again, I told him, just differently. At noon, we loaded into Robert's car and drove to Linda's house. My sister had outdone herself. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasting turkey, and she'd set her dining room table for 12 with her good china and crystal. About time you got here, she said, enveloping me in a hug. Dorothy's been here since 10, helping with the cooking and interrogating me about everything. The family had indeed assembled. Aunt Dorothy, sharp-eyed at 82 and still formidable. Cousin Beth with her husband and teenage daughter. Harold's sister Sarah, who'd driven down from Portland specifically for this gathering. Even my nephew. David had come, bringing his new girlfriend to meet the family, but the most surprising guest was sitting quietly in Linda's living room. Jessica. She looked smaller than usual, her designer outfit replaced with a simple sweater and jeans. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a plain ponytail, and she wore no makeup. When she saw us, she stood uncertainly, her hands twisting together. I hope it's okay that I came, she said to me, not to Robert. Linda called this morning and said the invitation was still open if I wanted to try again. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance, but all I saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. Can you be here without making everything about you? I asked directly. She flinched but nodded. I think so. I want to try. Emma and Jake ran to their mother, and for a moment, Jessica's carefully controlled composure cracked. She hugged them, fiercely, tears in her eyes, as if she'd been afraid she might never see them again. I missed you, she whispered into Emma's hair. We missed you too, Mommy, Emma said. But we had the best time with Grandma Margaret. We made cookies and played games, and Grandma told us stories about when Daddy was little. Jessica looked over Emma's head at me. Thank you, she said simply, for taking care of them. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was acknowledgement. A crack in the wall she'd built between us. Lunch was chaos in the best possible way. Too many people around Linda's table, passing dishes and talking over each other and laughing at Dorothy's. Increasingly outrageous stories about family scandals from decades past. Jake spilled gravy on his shirt. Emma got cranberry sauce in her hair. The rolls got slightly burned because we were all too busy talking to notice the timer. It was perfect. This is what Christmas should be, Sarah said as we cleared the table together. Messy and loud and full of love. Not Instagram-worthy enough for you, Jessica? Dorothy asked with characteristic bluntness. Jessica, who was helping Emma wash cranberry sauce out of her hair, paused. No, she said quietly. But it's real. And I think I forgot what that felt like. As the afternoon wore on, I watched Jessica. Carefully. She helped with dishes without being asked. She listened to Dorothy's stories without trying to redirect attention to herself. She played board games with the children and actually seemed to enjoy losing to them. When Emma asked her to help make hot chocolate, Jessica looked at me uncertainly. I don't really know how, she admitted. I usually just buy the fancy packets. Come on, I said, leading her to Linda's kitchen. I'll teach you. As we worked together, Jessica following my instructions carefully, asking questions about marshmallow to chocolate ratios like it was the most important thing in the world, I caught glimpses of who she might have been if she hadn't been, so determined to be perfect all the time. I owe you an apology, she said as we waited for the milk to heat. A real one. I stirred the chocolate, waiting. I was jealous of you, she continued, of how much Robert loved you, how much the children loved you, how easy everything seemed for you when it felt so hard for me. It wasn't easy, Jessica. I just didn't let you see when it was hard. I know that now, I think. I spent so much energy trying to replace you that I forgot to just be myself, and I lost Robert anyway. You haven't lost Robert, but you can't have him back the way he was. That man was miserable. She nodded, tears threatening. I made him miserable. I made everyone miserable, including myself. So what happens now? I don't know. Robert says we need counseling, that we need to figure out how to be married to each other instead of to our ideas of what marriage should look like. That sounds like a good start. Will you help me? She asked. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to learn how to be the kind of person who belongs in this family. Really belongs, not just performs belonging. I looked at this woman who had caused me so much pain, who had nearly succeeded in stealing my family from me. But I also saw Robert's wife and my grandchildren's mother, Someone who was finally asking for help instead of demanding compliance. I can try, I said. But Jessica, if you ever treat me the way you did before, if you ever try to exclude me from my own family again, I won't give you another chance. I understand. As the day wound down and people began to leave, Robert pulled me aside. Thank you, Mom, for everything, for not giving up on us even when we gave up on you. I didn't do anything except stop accepting unacceptable behavior. You did more than that. You showed me what I was in danger of losing, what we had all lost. He looked around Linda's living room, where Emma was showing Jessica how to properly dunk a cookie in milk, while Jake built a fort out of couch cushions. This is what I want, this chaos and warmth and realness. Then you have to fight for it. Every day, you can't let anyone, including Jessica, convince you that love should be conditional or performance-based. I won't. I promise. As we drove home that evening, Emma fell asleep in her car seat, cookie crumbs on her cheek. Jake dozed against my shoulder in the back seat. Jessica sat quietly in the passenger seat while Robert drove, all of us too tired and too full for much conversation. Can we do Christmas at Grandma's house next year? Emma mumbled sleepily. We'll see, sweetheart, Robert said. I think that sounds perfect, Jessica said quietly. It was the first time she'd ever endorsed one of my traditions. That night, after everyone had gone home and my house was quiet again, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and thought about the year that was ending. I'd started it feeling invisible and irrelevant, existing on the margins of my own family. I was ending it surrounded by people who valued me not for what I could provide, but for who I was. The phone rang. Linda's number. So, she said without preamble, how does it feel to get your family back? I thought about her question as I looked around my kitchen, at the cookie crumbs still scattered on the counter from yesterday's baking session with the grandchildren, at the family photos Robert had given me, now displayed prominently on my windowsill, at the art project Emma had left behind, a crayon, drawing of our family labeled Best Christmas Ever in her careful second-grade handwriting. It feels like coming home, I said finally, to myself. 3 months later, Jessica and I met for coffee. Not because we were best friends now, we probably never would be, but because we were family, and family shows up for each other. She was nervous, twisting her wedding ring around her finger as she talked about the therapy sessions she and Robert were attending. He says, I need to learn to trust that people will love me without me having to control everything, she said. It's harder than it sounds. Most worthwhile things are. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you think Robert and I can make this work? I studied her face, looking for the manipulative woman who had tried to erase me from my own family, but all I saw was someone genuinely trying to change, to become better. I think, I said carefully, that you can, if you both want to badly enough. But Jessica, you have to let him love his mother. You have to let the children have a relationship with me that doesn't go through you first. I know, and I will. I am. She paused, then added, I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out. It wasn't the grand gesture of contrition some part of me had always imagined. It was just a quiet acknowledgement between two women who had hurt each other and were trying to do better. But sometimes quiet acknowledgements are enough. Sometimes they're everything.